if folks can sit down, we're going to get started again. Thank you so much. I love that there's so much conversation happening about this. So we would love to hear from a couple of groups about what was one question that you were left with that you would love to hear more on from these panelists. And I'm really going to ask for it to be a one and a question. Thank you. Not a statement. So we'll take a couple, and then the panelists can kind of figure out, which questions they want to answer, if they want to kind of intertwine questions. So, do I have a couple hands? Any questions folks want to pose? Yeah. That's great. Nobody has. We're good? Questions? Yeah, we're good.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for your gifts, ongoing and always, and also today. I had a question about, I always feel inspired by y'all's work in Eyes on the Prize and very focused, disciplined motion towards that. And Alicia, I super appreciated your words about not being judgmental. And in my life, I'm struggling with some feelings around, not exceptionalism, because all the same, but also a little hella frustration with people that I'd like to be not staying behind enemy lines in the same way. And so I'm wondering if y'all have any words to us as folks that are currently grappling with tactics and strategy and collectivizing about that emotional sort of spiritual warriorness, the way that y'all hold space around non-judging, and about how do you push for Eyes on the Prize and strategy without tearing at humans for their own choices that they are making, because we all have contradictions. But how do you love the people enough to keep Eyes on the Prize and do what we need to do?
Thanks. Okay, who's next? Sure.
Many of you spoke about within your struggle, folks went to prison for a very long time. And I would like to ask if you would share with us ways that you believe that the struggle against colonialism, the struggle for resistance, can connect those of us who work outside the walls more intimately and more coherently with all of our loved ones who are inside the walls.
I'm just wondering if you can speak to what reparations might look like from your perspective. One more question?
Yeah. So we were having a conversation around what would it look like for us that are occupying this land to give the administration of the land back to you.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, much power to all of the wonderful people up here in the panel. I appreciated especially making the connections of capitalism and imperialism and its impacts on colonization in Palestine, on indigenous land. And we were talking specifically about, sometimes when people are talking about decolonizing, they talk specifically more individual of decolonizing their body and or their minds. And we were trying to figure out what is the relationship, or is it really specifically talking about the seizing of state power? Do we need to seize state power to actually decolonize the land, decolonize Palestine? So really talking about how do we talk about seizing state power collectively, being here or even also abroad?
All right, so take it away. Any questions that you want to answer or anything that you want to intertwine about those questions?
I want to address the first question because I think it's extremely important, very much so. Because it goes with Avatar, right? People look strange, but there was a common thread there. Avatar is one of my favorite movies. I tie into it because, you know, the web of life, you know what I mean, is a tree. And trees have roots, you know what I mean, and it has memories, and it has the spirit of the ancestors. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to touch basically the thing of spiritualism and the mind or whatnot. But there is a connection. And for Puerto Rico, you know what I mean, to have since the time of its invasion, you know what I mean, to be stripped of our powers, you know what I mean, we didn't have the ability to, you know, have power over our own economy. I mean, over our own court systems, over our own monetary system. That takes a lot from the will of the people. You know what I mean? It begins to, through time, whether, you know what I mean, the self-esteem of a nation, the self-esteem of people, you know what I mean, to make particular and important changes. So I took that with me, you know what I mean, when I crossed that threshold into a prison environment, and you walk into a prison environment alone, and you're stripped of your clothing, and it's a strip search, and they go through all of the openings of your body. I mean, so what are you left with if it isn't your soul and if it isn't your dignity? You know, so it allowed me, you know what I mean, to be so raw in a community of women in a dehumanizing environment. And I remember that it was so essential, you know what I mean, to come forth with cellmates and whatnot who were full of so much fear and so much aggression, and stand before them and tell them, I have nothing up my sleeves. You know what I mean? We are first and foremost women and human beings in this small, you know, cell environment. And are we gonna play the role, you know what I mean, of the jailer, and that is for aggression, you know what I mean, and, you know, and humiliating each other. So I think the quality of you know, developing a language, you know, and a reassurance that we're both in the same boat. You know what I mean? And the only way we can come out of this, you know what I mean, is by owning our space. You know, owning our space and to reaching out regardless, you know, and the regardless was to help each other. Because if we wouldn't help each other, we wouldn't have anything. You know what I mean? We would end up fighting. And, you know, I was for revolutionary, you know, I was part of a revolutionary movement, but it wasn't, you know what I mean, to degrade, you know what I mean, or harm another human being. Does that, can that somehow or other satisfy a little bit? Okay.
This is always fun when we do this. Like, who's gonna go? Who's gonna go? I want to add on to what Alicia just said about how do you keep your eyes on the prize, right? And not be judgmental. Can you not hear me? Hello? Is this working now? Okay. I always feel like I'm eating this thing when I'm Jeez. All right. So I know I'm chunky, but I'm not that hungry, okay? I think that what I wanted to say is that when I looked at the walks that we did in the Bay Area, and we did the reoccupation of our territory at Segurate, that it took all of us. It took men and women and people from all other genders to come forward, right? It took everyone to be a part of that, to recreate a village that might have been something like that a long time ago, to create an interdependence of people that lived there, that prayed together, that found their own jobs, right? That walked onto that land, that put tobacco in that fire, no matter where they came from in this world, and to find a niche to be there, whether it was chopping wood, whether it was taking care of children, taking care of elders, washing dishes, handing out medicines, whatever that was, that everyone brought their best face forward. And I think when you're able to rely on people in the movement to do those things with you, then you're able to collectively keep your eyes on the prize, right? We are there for a particular reason, but we are all together human beings. We all come there for a particular reason. And that's why I kept saying that it's important for there to be a spiritual base for the work that we do, whether it's collectively or around or individually, that there has to be something there. When we came back from that occupation in 2011, Occupy everything was happening, right? And we were asked to come and do the opening for Occupy Oakland. And we welcomed folks to our territory then. But it didn't last very long, right? And there was a particular reason that I felt when I look back at it, what happened was that people were trying to recreate a system that was already broken and use it to create this new movement. And it wasn't about coming around as fire together or some kind of spiritual basis together, but it was really about certain people holding the line, just like we do in governments today. So I think that we need to think differently about the way we come together and not to be judgmental of one another, but to really look at each other as what we can bring forward that is our best face. And that's what we're told in ceremony, to bring our best face forward. And what does that mean? Is that you're not going to be judgmental, but that you're going to try to look at your sisters and brothers and all of your allies, accomplices, with what they can bring, and to not throw that away.
When you asked your question, I thought of the role of organizing in this moment and moving our own people to the left and what it takes and the work it takes and the contradictions within it. And that's an obligation on all our parts to do that hard work and not to assume everybody is where they need to be or we want them to be or where we all want to be. And the flip side of it is there's also a lot of people we don't want in our movement. So, as a Palestinian and Arab, I don't want every Palestinian or Arab in our movement. In fact, many of them are part and parcel of the reason why we still have Israel as a colonial project in the state of Israel. So it's not so much about identity even, right? It's really about the politics and lived experiences of people and how we struggle together and the values and the commitments people hold and then moving people, into the left. In terms of the question around people on the outside uplifting or connecting to folks in prison, I think Palestine is a great example of that. There isn't one family in Palestine that hasn't had a brother, a cousin, a father, an uncle who's been imprisoned. It is part of how the colonial project continues to repress and control and suppress our work. And everywhere you go, on every wall, there's pictures of political prisoners. Every week, there's caravans of mothers and aunties and uncles and neighbors going to visit prisoners, not only their own children, but other people's children and brothers and sisters. And we take leadership from the prisons. So it's people inside, which mostly were our leaders at some point in the left, who are now all locked up, telling us and leading us around how we need to understand this world, where we need to put our energy, and how we can support them and their freedom, but also ultimately how they can help us understand how to get all of us to a place of liberation and freedom. So I don't know how that can be transferred here. I think all of us could be doing more around the issue of imprisonment here in the United States, particularly understanding the role of the current political prisoners who continue for decades now to be locked up. And most movements and most organizations don't necessarily center that or think about that. So there's work to be done there, and I always think about Palestine because for us, the issue of political prisoners is really the way in which we understand the issue of Palestine and colonialism and oppression. You can't talk about Palestine and you can't talk about our liberation. You can't talk about the left. You can't talk strategy and vision. You can't talk about how we're going to get to that prize without thinking about and taking leadership from prisoners. And then that also sort of connects to the question of state power. And, you know, when the Palestinian liberation movement started, it was because we got colonized by European powers and now by the United States and its support of it. And it was never a struggle for a state. It was never about getting a state. Statehood wasn't the goal. We lived in our land, we were indigenous to the land, we cultivated olive trees and fig trees and cactus, and we continue to do so. We were in connection to our neighbors. We understood where the end of our house was or our land because there was a cactus plant. That's how you know. Those were the fences back then, and they still, if you go to villages that have been demolished, you still see cactus everywhere that actually demarcates the boundaries of homes and neighbors and land. That's how we lived, and once we became colonized, it became about statehood because the Palestinian liberation movement then realized we were colonized by an apartheid state, by a racist settler colonial state, and in order to win our freedom, we had to bring down that settler colonial state, and we had to take power in our own hands for a liberated democratic state for all people, with the right of return of indigenous Palestinian people, with our land being returned to the rightful owners, and to live in dignity and freedom, regardless of your religion. So absolutely, I say decolonization is an individual project, but part of that is a collective project because we wouldn't be in this dilemma had it not been for colonial projects and states that are ultimately creating the devastation that we are facing. And in order to fight back and win, we do have to seize power. Whether it's state power or otherwise, we have to seize power. And that's part and parcel of our work.
Reparations look like? What does reparations look like? Okay, hello. Oh, I gotta get the mic again. Okay, reparations means y'all go home. The crazy thing about that is that many people don't know where the hell home is, right? And so then I think that your job then needs to be whose home are you on? And how do you work with those first original people of that land? I think that has to be folks' job. That they need to figure out what that place is. What was the name of it? What was the language that was spoken there? Who are the leaders in that area? And how can you be of service to those organizations or those folks that are working in their lands? I think that means you're an accomplice to the work that needs to be happening that's there. That's part of reparations, right? It's part of giving back, part of who you are to some of the folks that have been invisibilized, have had genocide put on them, have had all of these other things in this place. When we talk about taking over land here in Oakland, what does that look like, right? When our land is urbanized. So it's like we would have to take down this entire government, which I think needs to happen. I think it's a made-up government that should not have been put in place that is now using corporations in order to destroy the entire world. And that eventually enough of us will be woke enough to take the whole goddamn thing down. So I also think about what is giving back land. Somebody said something about giving back land. Yeah. So out of the Segurite takeover, we created the first indigenous women's land trust in an urban area, the Segurite Land Trust. So that was with a whole bunch of people. There was dreams that happened on that land when we took it over, and things that needed to be put in place that the ancestors said, here's another tool that you can use. We've been doing these walks and we've been organizing folks around a bunch of different issues, but this is a tool in order to try to get some of your land back. We had talked about the thousands of bodies that were in these institutions that were stolen and being imprisoned, but even if we were to get them back, we had no land base in order to rebury them. And so that was one thing that we needed to figure out. Then there's this whole idea that there's spiritual centers and there's arbors and roundhouses that have not been here for 200 years, where we are supposed to pray and we are supposed to sing songs. And that has to happen on some land, right? We need a land base in order to do this work. And so the Segurate Land Trust was created in order for us to do that work. But then we began to look around the Bay Area and all the different people that have been displaced, all of the different folks that now live in our territory that have been marginalized and need places to be, places to stand, places to sit, places to think, places to grow food, places for us to be a part of the land again. I think one of the most important things that Segurate, the occupation, taught us was the reconnection of human beings to land and what that means, to disconnect ourselves a little bit and to live in community with one another. And so the importance of bringing that into an urban area. And so the Land Trust will do that, we hope, with the help of others. And so the first piece of land was given back to us a couple of weeks ago through a collaboration with the Planting Justice, right? And Planting Justice is a crew of folks that are working with formerly incarcerated people and giving them jobs. And there was some difficulty that was happening there on that land. And they asked us to come over and to work with them. And so we did. And out of that conversation, they decided to give us a cultural easement onto the back part of the 2 acres on 105th Avenue, which is walking distance from my house, which is along the LaShawn Creek where my ancestors have always been. So this is, for me, it's a blessing and it's like an honor that this is happening and a miracle. And what does that mean? That means that also Planting Justice said, what else are we going to do is we're going to pay off this land and we're going to deed over the title to Segurate Land Trust. And we're looking at getting other land on the same block to do aquaponics and to provide jobs and housing for people, to have that land also be given back. So that's what it looks like to give land back and work in collaboration with indigenous people from here. Do you have a piece of land that needs to be worked? I have a friend who is creating this crazy idea across her backyard and 2 other people's backyards, where they're going to open up a creek again and bring back a school and gardening and having a roundhouse there if we want to, on 38th Avenue in Oakland. So these are the ways that we can do this. If we begin to imagine things outside of these blocks that folks created. We did not create these little tiny lots of land. This land was open for all of us to use. And so now we need to come together. We talk about reparations and giving back land. This is how we do it. We do it one lot at a time, one house at a time, one corporation at a time, one little bit at a time. And then we work that land together to create healing here for everybody that lives here. And so I'd be happy to talk to you guys about that some more. There's another thing that we created, along with accomplices and allies. There's this thing called Sha'umi, and Sha'umi in our language means a gift. And the Sha'umi tax was created for people that are living in our territory that want to see this vision happen and will pay a tax on the land that they're living in. And so you can go to our website and you can find out about how you might be able to participate in that. But it's a way for us to think about how do we live outside of the box? How do we take care of our own place here?